The goal for every NBA trade that was ever made is to put your team in a better position going forward. But as things turns out, that's not always the case. And surprisingly, it's kind of rare that trades actually end up working out for both teams. But in these 11 cases, it ended up as a win-win for both sides involved, where both teams benefited and got better after they happened. I will admit, I have made this video before, so I may repeat a couple trades from that one, but that video was over 3 years ago. So now I have a lot more to add on and a lot of new win-win trades to talk about. So let's go. The first one I want to mention happened just recently, and I'm not too sure what the future holds, but as of right now, this trade definitely looks like a win for both sides. And that was the Kevin Durant trade to the Phoenix Suns, which saw KD go to Phoenix in exchange for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and 4 first-round picks to Brooklyn. And I'll be honest, right now it looks like the Nets may have by far won this one. Mikal is currently averaging 27 points a game on 41% from 3, and Cam Johnson's averaging a career-high 16 a game. Both men are great defenders, and on top of that, they got 4 first-round picks, while KD's only played a handful of games for Phoenix. If Mikal keeps playing like a 26-year-old superstar, then I think the Nets ran away with this one. But we're just gonna have to wait and see how well he performs in the postseason to find out if he's the real deal or not. But either way, if that does happen and the Nets technically do win this trade, the Suns are still winners here. They had a team with championship potential for a few years now, and Chris Paul's career is winding down. So they needed to do something quick to capitalize on his last few years in the league, and there was no better way to do that than bring in Kevin Durant. They made a great move at the deadline to go all in, and they deserve credit for that. So I still love this trade going both ways. Another recent one from this past season has been the Domantas Sabonis trade, which saw Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield get traded to the Pacers in exchange for Domantas Sabonis and a few other assets. At first, this looked like a terrible deal for the Kings, and I'll admit I roasted them in a couple of videos and talked about how bad they were for making a move like this. And that was only justified more when early on the Pacers were winning a bunch of games and Sacramento hadn't started just yet. But myself and a lot of other people were wrong. The deal was definitely great for both teams and actually couldn't have worked out any better. Both guys became all-stars this year, found themselves in the MVP race, had breakout seasons, and have led their team to success, for the most part. Halliburton and Hield helped the Pacers find themselves in the playoff picture for the first half of the year, when they were supposed to be rebuilding, until Halliburton had a couple of injuries and had missed about 20 games. While Sabonis has led the charge for the Kings all year, averaging a near triple-double, leading the league in double-doubles, and being one of the best big men in the NBA. It's made to be one of those very rare cases of an NBA trade where on paper it might look bad, but the team chemistry and play styles mesh so well together that it's like magic. So shout out to both teams here, but especially to Sacramento, because I don't think I've ever been able to say that before. But while on the subject of the Pacers and Domantas Sabonis, we can look back at how he even got there. Back in 2017, Victor Oladipo and Domantas were still trying to find their home while struggling on the OKC Thunder. While on the other hand, Paul George had done all he could in Indiana, so OKC sent their 2 up-and-comers for the superstar in PG-13. And seeing how Paul had already made it clear that he wanted a trade, this was a solid deal, because Victor and Sabonis both really broke out there and became multiple-time all-stars. And it seemed like Victor found his home. He was the leader of this team, and when it also looked like they were headed for a rebuild, he even led them to the playoffs. While on the other hand, George found a team that he was happy with, playing with another star that he would go on to call one of his best teammates ever. They never had much success overall, but for what it was a good attempt. Now listen, in the end, all these guys wound up leaving their team for multiple trades and other reasons, but we're not going that deep. In the immediate few years after this happened, things went decently for both sides. Taking things back a little bit now, we can revisit the Trae Young-Luka Doncic trade. Now at first, in those first couple of years after they came into the league, this trade looked as even as it could get. The Hawks drafted Luka, then traded to him for Trae Young and a first-round pick, and Trae quickly became an all-star, averaging nearly 30 and 10. He had a lot of talent around him, so he was able to facilitate and be the player that the Hawks team needed, while Luka was much more hands-on and became the real superstar that this Mavericks team needed, while also averaging nearly 30 and 10. And both guys were making big names for themselves quick, had some major playoff moments, and it looked like a clear win-win. But Dallas has pulled away with the bigger W here. The Hawks haven't been great, Trae Young's been inconsistent, and things haven't been working for them as a team. Now nothing in Dallas has gone smoothly since Luka's been there either, but with how consistent he's been in being recognized as the next generational talent, trading for Trae Young and Cam Reddish doesn't look like the best trade, but I'll still consider it a win-win for now. One of the most unusual trades in NBA history happened to take place back in 2008, and it was when 2 brothers were traded for each other. There were other assets involved, but looking back, the main deal was Pau Gasol for Marc Gasol. Pau was already an established star at this point for the Grizzlies, and Marc was just coming into the league as a 2nd-round pick. So it's no surprise that LA had to add multiple other players and draft picks to sweeten the deal. So the deal went through and Pau wound up playing with Kobe Bryant. And because of their play and chemistry together, they won back-to-back championships only a year after Pau got there. So LA picked the perfect guy to trade for. And while at the time Marc Gasol was the least notable player in this deal, he actually very quickly became the centerpiece to the new Grizzlies system. He never had as much success as his brother, but those 2010 Grizzlies teams made some real noise in their deep playoff runs, and it wouldn't have happened without Marc. But speaking of him, that wasn't the only win-win deal he was a part of, because when he finally moved on from Memphis, he was traded to the Toronto Raptors in another pretty fair deal for Jonas Valanciunas. And of course, the year he gets traded, Marc plays a huge piece in helping the Raptors win their championship. He without a doubt became a role player on this new team, going from averaging 19-6 the year before to 9-6 during their playoff run, but his basketball IQ and post defense were huge contributions to that whole team working out. While on the other hand, Valanciunas would go on to join Memphis and instantly level up across the board, becoming a much more dominant scorer and rebounder. And this actually plays an important role too, because it leads us directly into our next win-win trade. Valanciunas had leveled up to averaging 17 and 12, which was great. He was playing the best of his career, but he started taking a little too many opportunities away from the Grizzlies' young roster. So they traded him away for basically Steven Adams and Zaire Williams. And it was perfect because the Pelicans now had a center that could do it all, but also stretch the floor when playing alongside Zion Williamson and not clog up the paint. While for Memphis, they now got a center who didn't need the ball in his hands at all, so that solved the problem of their big men getting the ball too much. But since Adams lacked on offense, they were also getting rookie Zaire Williams, who still has a lot of potential on both ends. But with all this talk about centers, we have to mention one of the GOATs in Shaq. And remember the time he was traded to the Miami Heat. The Lakers were set to break up, and Shaq made it very public that he didn't want to play with Kobe Bryant anymore. So he was sent to South Beach for Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, Bryant Grant, and a couple of picks. Now on paper, this deal isn't fair or even a great trade at all. But when you take everything into consideration, it might not have been fair, but it was a win-win. Shaq demanded the trade, so obviously LA wasn't going to get a fair deal. But the fact that they got a young Lamar Odom who became their 6th man of the year and a very key piece to their back-to-back championships just 4 years later should be enough. Because on the other hand, Shaq was also able to get another championship with Dwayne Wade almost right away. So both teams won titles, and there's not much more to ask for than that. But speaking to win-win trades that led to championships, let's not forget the Kevin Love deal that sent him to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This trade only led to him winning one title, but it was under different circumstances. The Cavs found themselves with the first overall pick in the draft, in the same offseason that LeBron James joins the team. So no matter who the player was, he didn't want a rookie as a key piece to his team. So Andrew Wiggins was drafted first overall and then traded on draft night along with Anthony Bennett to the Timberwolves for Kevin Love, who was still dominating at the time. And these were the years where it wasn't crazy that Kevin could have been traded for the first overall pick. So the deal got the Cavs rid of Anthony Bennett while also giving them another star to play alongside James, which worked out because they eventually won a title together. And for Minnesota, it gave them Wiggins, who at the time was being billed as the best prospect since LeBron. So even though the Timberwolves fumbled this one, as always, the actual deal was as fair as it gets given both team situations. And speaking of LeBron James, his next team would also trade their entire future for a chance at a championship, and it worked. When the LA Lakers traded Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and 3 first-round picks for Anthony Davis. Now, ever since he arrived on the Lakers, it's no surprise that almost every season has been ruined by injuries. But the one season he stayed healthy, the team was able to win a championship together, and ultimately it makes it a success. While for the Pelicans, it worked out for them too. With Davis, they were always a terrible team that would miss the playoffs, even though they had a superstar. Well, now today they're a young playoff team that has multiple stars and is still building their future. But while on the subject of the Pelicans and winning NBA titles, that perfectly brings us to the Drew Holiday trade to the Bucks. You see, Drew was stuck alongside AD on those Pelicans teams for 7 long years, and it never made sense to me why a contender didn't try to trade for him sooner. He was a guard that had some of the best defense in the league and could easily average 20 and 10. Well, once the AD trade went down, the Pelicans finally decided to move him, so the Bucks got him in return for a lot. It was basically Eric Bledsoe and 4 first-round picks, which was a ton to give up for a one-time All-Star. But when you have Giannis on your team, your current point guard couldn't shoot, and then they win the title the same year they trade for him, it was clearly well worth it. And as for the Pelicans, come on, 4 first-round picks doesn't even need to be explained. Then finally, one of my favorite win-win deals of the video was the Donovan Mitchell trade, which saw him get traded to the Cavs in exchange for Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, 3 first and 2 pick swaps. And it couldn't have been better. Donovan's a superstar, and he got to Cleveland and elevated them into a playoff team and one of the best in the Eastern Conference right away. And while the Jazz were looking to rebuild, they got all those picks to go along with a guy that instantly became an all-star by averaging 25 and 8 a game all year long. His team's still losing, so he's not superstar status or anything right now, but the fact that Lowry's transformed into a new player really made this a win-win for both teams, and that's been great to see. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'm out.